Let me introduce you to a little boy. As you can tell, this little boy has a lot of energy. But not only does he have a lot of energy and loves to jump off his parents' furniture, he also really loves skiing. In fact, he loves skiing so much that he even pretends to be skiing in his parents' living room when he doesn't actually have the chance to be out on the slopes. Well, some of you have already guessed it, this little boy was me. And at the age of probably 5 or 6, when people would ask me the typical question of, "What are you going to be when you grow up, little man?" I would promptly reply, "I'm going to be a skier," as if it was the most normal job a kid could want to have. So throughout my junior years, I started ski racing, and a few years into it, I became much more inspired by my snowboarding friends. Seeing them ride the powder and hitting jumps seemed much more appealing to me. So through them, I actually discovered free skiing. And for those of you who don't know what free skiing is, that's basically the form of skiing where you can hit jumps and do tricks like you see in the image. You can ride powder and go over cliffs and all that stuff. Obviously, everyone here knows what free skiing is. But once I discovered free skiing, I was truly in love with it. And that's the kind of skiing I really wanted to do. So from then on, I would come home from school and I watched magazines and videos and just basically visualize myself doing the same tricks the guys were doing in the videos. And on the weekends, I would go out and basically turn those into action. And with that method, I became fairly good at it. I entered my first competitions and actually did my first podiums and eventually had my first sponsor. And having my first sponsor was amazing. I mean, I got brand new skis for free. And this was actually the first time I even got new skis. You would always recognize me for being the kid with the crappiest gear. I was like wearing my dad's super old ski boots. I was wearing my uncle's skis and pants that looked more like jogging pants. I was actually wearing that same helmet you saw in the kids' picture when I entered my first competitions. So with the help of my sponsors, I was now able to travel the world and I basically got to do what I love to do most, which was skiing. So I dedicated all of my time and energy towards skiing. And I worked really hard to be the best skier I could possibly be. At the same time, though, I wasn't taking life all too serious and I mostly just wanted to have fun. In 2008, 10 years ago, I got the opportunity to travel to Alaska and make a long-desired dream come true. And Alaska, much like Chamonix would be, is pretty much the freerider's mecca. I think most skiers at one point in their life want to ski in that place. So I went there with a small group of people to film for a new ski film production at the time. Along with me were my friends Julien Renier, Fabian Meyerhofer, and a photographer and a filmer. And it was around April, and we've already spent a few days out there, and we got in the helicopter. It was probably 6 o'clock in the morning when we lifted off and kind of flew into this zone that we previously picked out where we wanted to ski. So we get there, we each do a warm-up run, and then we prepare for this big face that we wanted to film that day. So Fabian and I get in the helicopter, we take the doors off. We did that because we had to do a tow-in. And a tow-in, basically, here's an example of one, is, well, there's not enough room for the helicopter to land on top oftentimes, so the pilot sort of needs to just hover on top, putting the nose down, allowing us in the back to get out. And so here's Fabian and I approaching this ridge in Alaska, and I mean, as you can imagine, sitting in a helicopter with no door and you high up there, and it's all these intimidating big peaks and steep faces. It's a pretty scary maneuver. So we get to the top, we get out, it's super windy and loud, and the snow is blowing into our face. And the helicopter takes off, and then it's just pure silence. And I remember being up there, and I look over at Fabian thinking to myself, what are we doing up here? And in order to get to where I had wanted to ski, I had to walk along the ridge for probably about 40 meters. So I take my skis and I take 4 steps. And that's when I hear this frightening sound of just whoom. And basically what happened is this big cornice, which basically is this overhang of snow that you can see here in the image, had failed. Now I was well aware that there's a cornice, so I tried to stay away from it as much as I could. But the fracture line happened to just be right in front of me. So it was as if someone just pulled a rug right underneath my feet, pulling me back down with it. And it all happened so quick, there was no time to react. So as I fall, I was able to sort of hold on to a rock, and I was like holding on really quickly. I noticed that I'm not gonna be able to, and I just kind of lost grip and fell back. And right in that moment, I thought that my life is going to end. I was actually pretty certain. So I go down, and the cornice lands in this first pocket of snow. It triggers an avalanche, and I go down with like the avalanche and over all this steep, this whole steep face. And as you can imagine, on a physical level, this was a pretty violent and forceful event. And I was basically just waiting for that one big impact that would knock the life out of me. What was interesting to me was, on a different level, this whole experience was very different. The moment I lost grip and I fell back thinking that I'm gonna die, it was as if time just stopped. And suddenly there was like thousands of thoughts and emotions that kind of rushed through my brain. All these memories I had from my childhood, my family, and all these things that I couldn't even remember existed in my life before. So I tumbled down to the bottom. I managed to stay on top of this avalanche. I came to a stop in the debris at the very bottom, and miraculously, I was physically almost unharmed. And I remember being there, still super overwhelmed by what happened. I'm laying in the snow. I look up, and the snow dust just settled slowly. It's kind of beautiful. It's all sparkling. And I look up, and I just kind of realized that my life is probably not going to continue as it did before. So here's actually an image of the whole face. So I basically fell from the very top. You can see me at the very bottom here after I just kind of made my way out of the debris. Fabian, in case you're wondering, he's actually still up there. He's actually in this image, which also gives you a perspective of how big it was. And he had to down climb and make his way back. So yeah, after this, over the next few weeks, I definitely noticed that my life has changed, or something within me has changed. And it was as if I looked at life through different eyes. This became particularly obvious to me when I actually returned skiing, putting myself into similar situations that I have been many times before. And even though I have done the same things many times before, I was suddenly not able to physically function anymore. Now, as an action or extreme sports athlete, you have to understand that overcoming fear is sort of a natural byproduct of what you have to do in order to push yourself forward. So I was kind of used to this. But now I was in the position where where I was defeated by fear. And I hated that. I hated the fact that I now couldn't achieve my goals in skiing anymore because fear was so strong. So this was really frustrating, and I kind of lost the fun in skiing, and thoughts of quitting crossed my mind. At the same time, there was something inside of me that basically told me that quitting is not going to be an option. It felt to me that if I quit for this reason, it would basically mean that I'm giving up on myself. So instead, I wanted to find answers and wanted to learn more about myself. So with the help of a mental and spiritual coach, I learned the importance of paying attention to my thoughts and my emotions. Now that's something I haven't really done before, like looking inside of me, understanding my emotions. But now I really started to watch myself react to certain situations and actually understand the role my emotions are playing in my life. And again, as I already explained it, even though I have skied similar lines hundreds and hundreds of times before, I was now not able to do it anymore because this emotion and strong fear related to another event was actually holding me back from it. So I learned that thoughts lead to emotions and emotions lead to actions. And I was thinking to myself, well, if my subconsciousness is impacting my actions in this particular situation, now could it be that I am acting under the influence of my emotions and fears in other situations of my life as well? Well, the answer was pretty obvious. So over time, I discovered 4 basic steps. Step number 1, setting myself goals. This is really important to me. Obviously, if I don't have goals, I will most likely not achieve too much. So step number 2 is become aware of excuses. And that basically means to understand your emotions. Oftentimes, when I set myself a goal, that means that on the way there are certain obstacles that I need to overcome. And they essentially create some kind of emotions or excuses of why I wouldn't have to do it. So in this situation, it's really important to find value in risk. Finding value in risk, to clarify this, finding value in calculated risk. Basically, that means to imagine the outcome. So in skiing, for example, there's high physical consequences on one hand, but on the other hand, there is this high potential that I can possibly achieve. And that perspective really, and that to me means that I have much more to gain than I have to lose. And that essentially puts me into step number 4, which basically is the doing it part. And that is actually, a very important step. After all, that's basically just means to execute the plan in order to achieve the goal. So I was actually applying those 4 steps in skiing for a long time. I was just never too aware of it. But in skiing, when I go out, I approach a mountain and I see this one particular line that sort of sticks out to me. So I look at the line and I make it my goal to ski this line. I look at it, I picture myself going down it, I make this perfect plan, and I visualize myself skiing the line. So when I feel ready, that's when I put myself on top. And this is when step number 2 kicks in full force. And I'm like, whew, this looks much better from over there than it does from here. I don't know if I should really do this. Could someone maybe come get me? And so this is when this sort of battle happens, where on one hand there's my rational brain that basically tells me, I'm capable of doing it, I have it perfectly visualized, I have this plan. And then on the other hand, there's like all these emotions that come in and all these what if questions. Well, what if I catch an edge? What if I crash? What if this goes wrong? What if the cliff is much bigger? And all this stuff. And this is when finding value in that risk is actually really important, because that's when I sort of imagine myself at the bottom already after I've accomplished skiing that line. And that feeling that I know I will gain from achieving skiing that line is essentially what sort of overpowers those fears and makes me just sort of drop in and do step number 4, which is the doing it part. And so really important to me was the positive thinking, because it's much like when you eat unhealthy foods, well, you compromise your body. And the same thing applies to your mind. If you consume negative thoughts, you compromise your mind. And I really learned that through that process. So I actually applied those 4 steps to pretty much all areas of my life. I started a real estate business with my best friend a few years ago. And it's the same thing there. We set ourselves big goals, and then in order to achieve them, there are certain obstacles on the way. So it might not exactly be that I'm scared of dying when I do business, but it's, fear of failure, fear of losing your existence, fear of rejections. There's all kinds of fears that on a daily basis need to be overcome. And same thing again, it's this imagination or imagining what the outcome of that project or that deal is going to be that essentially, makes us do the deal or do the project. And the doing it part is so important, because unless you actually do the deal in business, you will never succeed or grow your business. In skiing, if I don't actually ski that line, I will never become a better skier. So I think emotional challenges are just kind of the price you pay for a life chasing dreams. But to me, setting goals and achieving them is the best feeling in the world. So fear, if channeled correctly, is a really powerful motivator. So I'm really excited to share some of my last or latest impressions from my last trip to Alaska with you all.
A time